This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Here's a look at what's coming up on the show today. Africa's largest trade market is finally operational. We'll have the details on what that means for the continent. The cost of imported cars is set to increase in Nigeria. And the UK enters a new chapter as the transition period ends. Now, the first goods began to flow in the continental free trade area on Friday, and that's after the AU officially launched what could become the world's biggest free trade zone. Now, this trade pact opens the door to much needed growth in trade amongst African nations. Experts say intracontinental trade could rise to more than $231 billion. Let's take a closer look at that trade pact. Now, after years of talks, Africa will be launching what is expected to be the world's largest free trade area by the number of countries in January. It is an ambitious plan, and here's why. The goal of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is to establish a single market for goods and services across 54 nations. That means a pact among all 54 nations could see the free movement of people and investments across the continent and the creation of a continental customs union in order to streamline trade. Now, getting this done will be a huge feat for Africa. Experts say it has the potential to lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty. And of course, fully implementing the plan could reshape entire markets and economies, as well as boost output in the services, manufacturing, and natural resources sectors. But the scope of the AFCFTA is quite large. It means getting all 54 nations to agree to reduce tariffs, change their national policies to support trade facilitation and services, and get individual regulators to introduce measures such as sanitary standards. Now, so far, there has been significant progress since the deal was signed in March 2018. 54 countries have signed the agreement, but only 34 have deposited instruments of ratification or signaled consent. 41 countries and customs unions have submitted their tariff offers, including the East Africa Community and the Unity of West African States. Well, as far as the Secretary General of the AFCFTA Secretariat, Wamkele Mene, is concerned, that is enough to kick off a commercially meaningful start of trading on the 1st of January 2021. Now, the hope is that this will be the start of a move to end Africa's reliance on the export of primary commodities and put the continent on a track for long-term industrial development. Now, earlier on, the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Mr. Wamkele Mene, gave us some more perspective on that trade deal.
Well, today is a very historic day for us Africans because we have taken a historic milestone to integrating the market on the African continent. From today onwards, exporters, traders will be able, of course, amongst the 33 countries who have ratified the agreement, their goods will transit through the borders at reduced tariffs. Second, we have now developed a system for dispute settlement amongst ourselves. If there's a commercial investment dispute, we will no longer have to go to Europe to resolve that dispute to the WTO. We will do so in Africa in accordance with our own rules. Third, we are designing an interconnectivity application to connect small, medium enterprises who want to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area, so that if you are a small, medium enterprise in Ghana, you can access the markets in Kenya, and you are able to make full use of the new market that this agreement creates and the new opportunities that this agreement shall create for millions and millions of Africans, whether it is in small, medium enterprises, or indeed if we're talking about women in trade and young Africans in trade. I should add that it takes a long time for benefits under a free trade agreement to be seen on the ground. It takes 3 to 4 years for an exporter to develop new supply chains to take advantage of the new market. So whilst we have opened the market today, and whilst today you will be able to export your goods at reduced barriers for investment, for trade, for a range of other regulations that we have reduced, that process starts today. But the benefits and the results, it will take time for us to see and for ordinary Africans to experience those benefits. And my job and our job is to make sure that that period of Africans being able to access those benefits, that period is minimized as much as possible.
Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area is an important milestone in the continent's history of development. It is also a part of the African Union's Vision 2063. The agreement will, in effect, accelerate the economic integration of the African continent, as well as a push for the rapid development of Africa's economy, trade, and various industries. CGTN's Alexandria Majala explores that now.
The African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to have a positive impact on economic and trade development among African countries, as well as between China and Africa.
So it's a great opportunity for Africa in terms of growing its economy, increasing inter-African trade, growing its various sectors, its industrial sector, its agricultural sector, the new technologies. Almost every sector is going to benefit as a result of the free movement of goods and services once the agreement comes into force on the 1st of January 2021. But it's also a great opportunity for the international community to partner in Africa in developing Africa's economy for mutual benefit. And China is an important partner in this, being the most important and largest trading partner of Africa.
China's presence in Africa has increasingly grown over the years, and the Southern Asian nation has a hand in many infrastructure projects across the continent. Chinese multinational companies are also establishing production bases in Africa that help the continent achieve economic diversification in fields such as manufacturing. In addition, China also provides scholarships and capacity building opportunities for African talent.
3 out of 5 African infrastructure projects currently are being built by Chinese companies, and 1 in 5 of Africa's infrastructure projects presently is being funded by the Chinese. So China is a major partner, not just in infrastructure, but also in helping Africa diversify its economy. China is a major player in terms of manufacturing on the African continent.
The AfCFTA deal unites an estimated $3 trillion market and could help realize more than $84 billion in untapped intra-African exports. With all the African countries except Eritrea participating, the AfCFTA has the largest number of member countries in any trade deal since the formation of the World Trade Organization. By giving a boost to intra-regional trade in manufacturing, the deal is expected to increase employment opportunities and help women get into the workforce. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, let's now turn our attention to markets. 2020 was undoubtedly a wild year for markets globally. Broadly, emerging market stocks did record annual gains. We saw MSCI's index of emerging market stocks closing the year at a 13-year peak. That's about a 16% rise. Now, analysts are saying that investors consistently chose the best case scenario, but of course, gains were encouraged by Joe Biden's victory in the US and the development of COVID-19 vaccines. Now, in South Africa, the JSE ended 2020 up 4.1%. That's its second consecutive annual gain. Market heavyweight Naspers, which accounts for over 25% of the two main indices, ended the year with a 30% return on its share price since January. In Nigeria, the NSE closed with a 50% gain, the most since 2007, and one of the world's best performing bourses of the year. Dangote Cement's share buyback on Wednesday certainly did help to boost market performance on the last trading day of the year in Nigeria. And moving on, business confidence in South Africa rose to its highest level in 2 years in the fourth quarter of 2020. It is a solid rebound in economic activity since a hard lockdown was instituted at the end of March. Here's Sumitra Naidu reporting.
Business in South Africa slowly getting back on track. Whilst the hard lockdown was necessary, it battered the economy. But according to the latest RMB Business Confidence Index, there's some upside.
I think it was expected that some sectors of business would begin to ramp up, and that's what's happened. But I think we need to appreciate that that ramp up is from a significant drop in the previous quarter. What we've seen in the last quarter is that the opening up of the economy in the last couple of months after going down to lockdown level 1 has had a beneficial impact on economic growth.
All sub-indexes in business confidence rose, albeit off a low base. There are concerns, though, that a second wave of COVID-19 currently sweeping across the country will impact business again.
I think we're certainly probably past the worst. Because I don't imagine that we would go back to a hard lockdown like we saw at level 5 that crippled many businesses' opportunity to actually operate. I think where we're not past the worst is particularly structurally reconfiguring the economy to be able to grow sustainably. We've got to make sure that we remove those structural impediments.
The president addressed South Africans Monday night announcing tighter restrictions to curb the spread, but was careful not to limit business too much.
We've seen in Europe, as we continue to see in America, the virus hasn't gone away. In fact, the virus is even stronger in the second wave, and we're beginning to see that in South Africa. We have certainly said publicly that we don't think if a move from lockdown level 1 to stronger lockdowns is appropriate. We don't think that's going to actually assist in curbing the growth of and the spread of the virus, and it will have a detrimental impact on the economy.
The business confidence index jumped to 40 from 24. It's a significant rise, but one that comes on the back of eased lockdown regulations. South Africa still has a long way to go before strong economic activity returns and the business environment is more conducive for entrepreneurs. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, net foreign assets in the Egyptian banking sector have recovered from their lows earlier in 2020, and they were helped by the return of foreign inflows to the capital markets. According to ratings agency Fitch, the sector's fortunes turned mildly positive and continued that upward trend throughout the fourth quarter of 2020. Well, Yasser Hakim assesses the performance of the country's banking sector in 2020 and the expectations for 2021.
Banks in Egypt have carried most of the burden of the government's fiscal policies to help cushion some of the economic fallout caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Egyptian banks had to pump over $10 billion in emergency funds and measures as the virus ravaged the country.
We delivered a stimulus package worth about 2% of GDP, in addition to fiscal stimulus policies that included a cut in interest rates, waiving loans to affected economic sectors, providing financial packages and funding to businesses and individuals, giving grace periods for tax payments, and postponing loan payments for individuals and companies as well.
This high expenditure coincided with major losses of revenue in April, when panicked foreign investors withdrew $17 billion out of the country. That's over 60% of foreign capital in Egyptian banks. At the same time, the financial institutions were ordered to support small and medium-sized businesses to help keep them afloat.
There is no doubt that entrepreneurship and giving support to entrepreneurs is crucial for economic development, and the Central Bank of Egypt has given special focus on this by availing £200 billion for the banks to be availed and for entrepreneurs to have access to finance. And access to finance is one of the main pillars of financial inclusion, which is also very important for the strategic vision of Egypt in 2030.
Banks saw a quick recovery in foreign capital starting June. By the end of 2020, foreign holdings of local currency T-bills and bonds reached $23 billion from a low of $8 billion in April and May. Fitch Ratings says Egypt's positive carry trade is attractive to overseas investors, supported by a stable exchange rate and high yields. However, Egyptian banks have relied on external borrowing to raise their asset portfolio. Some fear, as COVID-19 continues with a strong second wave in 2021, this could trigger another sell-off from foreign investors and destabilize the financial sector. But most bankers in the North African state are not worried.
I think that we already have the experience, and we've been there before since last March 2019. We're very much prepared to deal with all the challenges that are coming. I don't think that COVID-19 would have an impact on expanding the business. Of course, it would have a small impact, but we don't see that it would deter our plans.
Experts say what banks need is a strong rebound from local sectors that generate hard currency, like tourism, increased activity along the Suez Canal, exports and foreign direct investments, instead of resorting to foreign capital inflows. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's take a quick break now. Still coming up on the show. The cost of imported cars set to increase in Nigeria. And global warming will remain key on the agenda in 2021.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Now let's head to Nigeria, where the cost of imported vehicles is set to increase from 2021. This, of course, follows the country's move to implement the Cleaner Vehicles policy from the 1st of January 2021. Now, the policy, spearheaded by the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, is geared towards combating environmental pollution. However, this will also come at a cost for Africa's economic giant. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reporting.
A variety of cars lined up in this outdoor car stand in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, from regular to luxury vehicles. Ajibola Adedoyin is the President, Car Dealers Association of Nigeria. He imports mainly used cars from the US and Europe. New vehicles are much more costly and difficult to sell, especially in a country like Nigeria where more than 40% of the population is poor. But Nigeria is moving towards regulating vehicle imports as part of measures to going green. While it has its gains, the Car Dealers Association says the policy is not sustainable.
Vehicles are necessities. They are not luxury. Because don't forget that, look, the three forms of transportation we have, the only surviving one for now, which is available to more than 200 million Nigerians, is the road transportation, which has to do with vehicles. And that's the only surviving one. So if anything tampers with it, it has tampers with the nerve of the economy of Nigeria.
Nigeria is one of ECOWAS's 15 countries ready to tackle the harmful effects of environmental pollution from old vehicles. The ECOWAS Fuel Grade and Vehicle Emission Standards Regulations pushes for cleaner fuel and vehicles in the West African region. When implemented, only vehicles no more than 5 years old would be allowed into the region.
If you look at it, our borders is bordering different countries, and some are francophones. And those ones will not at all stop the inflow of such cars into their own places. And we have land borders with these people. And these things are necessities. So, and we cannot police our borders. We don't have that capacity. We don't have it. So before you know it, when it enters there, they will just escalate the rate of smuggling. And there will be so much connivance, even with the officers in charge. And the government will lose lots of revenue. And then there will be so much hike in the price of vehicles.
Depending on the make and model, used cars no more than 5 years old cost at least $9,000 and even more. That's far beyond the reach of the ordinary Nigerian, whose minimum wage is about $75 monthly. Many more are being plunged into poverty, having lost their sources of income due to the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 lockdown. Now, car dealers and key players in the transportation industry are proposing a halt on the policy, at least until Nigeria improves on its alternative transportation sources. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, most of 2020 has been a volatile year for Libya, with fierce fighting between rival powers in the country. And oil, a vital backlog for the economy, has been in the midst of this conflict. But there is still hope for Libya's battered economy, as oil production did inch to the pre-war civil level, thanks to a truce signed towards the end of the year. Here's Yasser Hakim with more details.
Libya has one of the largest oil reserves in Africa. That's why the decade-old civil war between Libyan faction is more about controlling oil output than just seeking power. A ceasefire and ongoing peace negotiations since September have allowed the state-owned National Oil Corporation to increase production more than eightfold to about 1.3 million barrels per day. This amount is low compared to pre-civil war levels, but is significant to the economy as it is the main source of income for the state budget.
The budget for 2020 is estimated at 45 billion Libyan dinars, $33 billion. The current production barely covers the salaries of government employees, let alone the rest of the expenses. There should be investments in upgrading the oil facilities to produce more and make up for the loss through crude oil production.
Libya depends primarily on revenues from the petroleum sector, which represents over 95% of export earnings and 60% of its GDP. Proceeds from the oil revenue is distributed between the Government of National Accord and the minority share to the rival parliament and Libyan National Army in the east. But as experts say, there should be other sources of revenue to stabilize the economy.
It was the choice of the former regime to rely on oil only, and the insecurity of the last 10 years have prevented any changes in policies. But there is big potential in Libya. There are opportunities in agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. These had not been tapped until recently. There must be a strong private sector as well. It doesn't exist there.
The situation in Libya is, however, delicate moving into the new year. The head of the National Oil Corporation, Mustafa Sanallah, has blocked access to the oil income deposited daily at the central bank. He has accused some government officials of corruption in distributing the oil revenue, although they have denied the allegations. The standoff might put more pressure on the North African nation's economy and the state budget for 2021. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, a South African Sauvignon Blanc has been voted the best in the world at the prestigious 2020 International Wine Challenge. Currently, South Africa ranks as 9th in overall volume production of wine, producing 3.3% of the world's wine. Now, South African wines fall under the umbrella of New World wines. However, due to insufficient publicity and less awareness, South African wine currently only represents about 1% of Chinese wine imports. Well, now, South African wine producers are keen to further open up to the Chinese market. This comes after the Ministry of Commerce of China announced that it had adopted temporary anti-dumping measures against Australian wine imports.
Currently, the Chinese market are focusing very strongly on French and Australian wine, and it's perceived that those countries are producing very, very good quality wines. Our hope and aim with this award is that they will also focus on the South African wine industry, as we are also producing very good quality wines that's comparable and doesn't necessarily stand back for French and Australian wine.
We've seen China put trade restrictions on Australian imports, especially on the wines. This has now opened a door for the South African wine industry to capture more of the Chinese market. South Africa currently only represents about 1% of the Chinese market in terms of imports of wines. To allow the South African market or the South African producers to level the playing field, this is an excellent opportunity that China is presenting them to actually enter the market, capture more of the market share, and actually then retain that market share.
Well, let's head to Ethiopia now. The country's national carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, is turning to its cargo service to help keep it above ground. That's after a drop in passenger traffic and $190 million in lost revenue, of course, due to the coronavirus pandemic. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala reporting.
The global aviation sector has been riddled with huge revenue loss and job cuts amid the coronavirus-induced restrictions. For Ethiopian Airlines, this has led to the conversion of passenger planes into cargo in a bid to overcome the drastic downturn in revenue.
We have been converting passenger aircraft to cargo aircraft. We have converted 20 of them. It depends on the fleet, but it took 36 hours and less. And we have been doing this for the past 2 months.
Engineers have been busy transforming their planes in accordance with the new strategy. Ethiopian Airlines chief executive Tolda Gebremariem says there has been surge in demand for cargo, mainly due to the demand in Europe and America for personal protective equipment and medical supplies to tackle the virus.
The majority are importers of COVID-19 personal protection equipment and medical supplies. And these are located in Africa, in Europe and America, and particularly Europe in the beginning when the COVID-19 spread was very high.
Ethiopian Airlines is among the few airlines worldwide that has not cancelled any jet purchases. This is despite the collapse in global air travel, though several orders, including some from Boeing and Airbus, have been delayed. Between January and April, the airline recorded a loss of $550 million. However, Tewolde has ruled out seeking a bailout from the Ethiopian government.
We are a little bit more optimistic. So we see some kind of maybe 50% recovery in the summer because it's a summer peak. And we see that people are sick and tired of the lockdown.
The global aviation industry has been at a virtual standstill due to the coronavirus pandemic, forcing airlines that were once eager for new jet deliveries to grow their networks to scale back their flying schedules and park planes. Grumchara, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break, but still coming up on the show. The UK enters a new chapter as the transition period ends. And a review of business in Europe at the face of COVID-19 pandemic.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, Brexit is now official. London's Big Ben chimed on Thursday to mark the UK's separation from the European Union. That is more than 4 years after the country voted for Brexit. Now, the UK has left the EU single market and a customs union. Now, goods crossing the border will be subjected to customs and other checks. Britain is free from EU laws, able to sign trade agreements with other nations. But still, much remains unknown about the future after the UK's 5 decades in the bloc.
There are tough weeks and months ahead, but we can see that illuminated sign that marks the end of the journey. And even more important, we can see with growing clarity exactly how we're going to get there. And that is what gives me such confidence about 2021.
Now, in light of a Brexit, haulage firms are amongst the businesses preparing for the new trading relationship between the UK and EU. CGTN's correspondent Ross Cullen has more from Calais, France.
The port of Calais is a symbolic location, illustrating the proximity of the UK and France. For more than 45 years, there's been free movement for people and goods between continental Europe and the United Kingdom. But that's set to change, and haulage firms have been making moves to prepare, with a rush by some companies to get as much trade done as possible before standards and immigration checks kick in. RDV Transport exports spices and wheat flour to the UK. They've seen a surge in orders and their shelves are packed.
It's completely full. There's no more room. We're strained every single day.
Jean-Pierre Devigne is the manager of the company. He says he's had to figure out a lot of the new rules for himself.
We've had no support from the government. We've had to get everything ready by ourselves with scant information on the procedures. Of course, we've prepared as much of the customs formalities as we can, but that's all we're able to do for now.
There are about 60 ferry journeys each day between Calais and Dover, around 30 in each direction, with a journey time of just an hour and a half. At the moment, the boats come and go, loaded with exports and imports. But this will be the front line for the new relationship when the UK leaves its transition period with the EU on the 31st of December.
Although just 40 kilometres of sea separate France and the EU from the UK across the channel behind me, there's been an ocean of policy differences in trying to find a trade deal acceptable to both sides.
The chief executive of the Port of Calais says his side has been ready for Brexit since 2019, when the UK was originally scheduled to leave the EU. He spent nearly $1 billion upgrading the port, for any consequences from the 1st of January when customs, regulatory and agri-food checks will be introduced.
2021 is going to be a year where we will have to deal with two viruses, Brexit and COVID-19. First, we will have to see how Brexit is going, and over the next months we will know more about the pandemic too. 2021 will be a year of convalescence, and 2022 should be when things start to get back to normal.
4 years on from the UK's vote to leave the EU, Britain is nearly at the end of the road. The door is closing on its single market membership. The British government is hoping for a smooth exit come January the 1st, but others fear international trade could be disrupted by truck tailbacks, customs clearances and a new border between the UK and the EU. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Calais.
And let's head to the US now. Fewer Americans sought unemployment benefits last week. New claims for benefits reported by the US Labor Department on Thursday dropped for the second week in a row to over 780,000 in the week ending December 26th. That's a modest dip from a week before. Now, it left them at roughly the level they were 3 months ago, and with little indication they will show material improvement anytime soon. Meanwhile, the preliminary data shows that 2020 was amongst the hottest years on record. That's matched closely by 2016 and 2019. In a year dominated by headlines about the COVID-19 pandemic, CGTN's Ramanyang explores how climate change continued to inflict long-lasting harm across the continent in 2020.
Now, climate change has drastically changed what used to be a somewhat predictable, steady weather pattern for farmers and energy planners alike. As we wrap up 2020, though, this has been described as a decade of exceptional heat. Not my words, but those from the World Meteorological Organization. 2020, in fact, based on the data they've seen so far, is on track to be one of the 3 warmest years on record, just behind 2016 and just ahead of 2019. Now, to be clear, the final consolidated data sets are due in the middle of January, but the effects of this rising heat and the higher than usual precipitation that we saw in many parts of Africa can already be seen. As the Food and Agriculture Organization pointed out, we're not making any progress in meeting the goal of making sure that everyone has access to nutritious food all year round. In fact, if current trends do continue, according to FAO forecasts, the number of undernourished people will essentially hit 840 million worldwide by 2030. And that's not far off. That's just 9 years away. Here's what's worse. By cutting jobs and cutting incomes or affecting the flow of remittances across the world, this pandemic is also forecast to raise the number of undernourished people around the world by at least 83 million just in 2020. And the other impacts, of course, are much more dramatic worldwide. You may have missed it, given the headlines focused on the pandemic pretty much elsewhere, but there was pretty severe flooding in parts of East Africa this year. In Sudan and in Kenya, over 440 people died in those floods. The River Niger and the Nile River, they both hit record levels. The Nile's at least 17 meters high. With that much water around, it amplified another problem, the worst ever desert locust invasion in the Horn of Africa that this region has had to deal with at least in the last 7 to 10 decades, and which Ethiopia, Somalia and Kenya have to contend with in 2021. So in a nutshell, yes, COVID-19 may have dominated headlines in 2020, but climate change still poses a bigger, significant long-term threat in decades to come.
Our businesses in Europe have suffered major setbacks following the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. This has left various sectors reeling from the unexpected downturn that, of course, has been coupled with a surge in job cuts and huge drops in revenue. Well, tonight we look at how businesses in Europe have been affected by the impact of the pandemic.
The International Air Transport Association says the virus could knock $113 billion off global passenger revenues. That's a blow that some airlines aren't going to be able to withstand.
It feels like a lifetime ago. Before COVID hit, Heathrow was in its heyday. In April and May, passenger numbers down 97%.
The global pandemic couldn't stop Milan Fashion Week.
Like many other Italian brands, Prada has also transformed its factories to produce masks and overalls for health workers.
I don't think we've ever been as quiet with 4 months of closure.
Gary's factoring in for a loss of up to $310,000. Other pub owners may be unable to withstand such losses.
Budapest theatres normally attract hundreds of thousands each year, but they've been quiet for months due to the pandemic.
It isn't just the second largest cinema chain worldwide that's been affected by fewer people turning out to watch films on the big screen.
Literally, it's nowhere to go at the moment.
But in a country renowned for its cinema and literature, the effect of the lockdown has been severe. The French capital and Marseille are now so-called red zones.
French President Emmanuel Macron has already announced slopes in the French Alpine region will remain shut until 2021.
The finals of the Champions League, along with the Europa League, were formally postponed by European football's governing body UEFA. The potential revenue loss for Europe's top 5 leagues, €4 billion this season.
The COVID-19 pandemic had accelerated the trend for online shopping.
As more of the UK goes into lockdown, these drivers are hoping their fortunes will reverse. The delivery sector could become even more important.
Spain's economy was one of the hardest hit, with the government saying it expects its GDP to shrink by 11.2% this year.
Don't forget, Greece is the second wave of this economical crisis.
Greece is riding out this storm better than some right now, but it doesn't have much leeway.
A new climate target finally got the green light.
The fact that we were able to commit to a joint European reduction target of 55% by 2030 is, in my view, a very important result.
The COVID-19 crisis is a wake-up call. Economies and societies must be reshaped to be fairer and more inclusive.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets. Global commodity markets certainly ended 2020 on a strong note. Recovering demand and stimulus packages helped to boost prices after a roller coaster ride caused by the coronavirus. Now, crude oil markets lost about a fifth of their value in 2020 on the back of strict coronavirus lockdowns. But prices have rebounded strongly as governments rolled out stimulus packages. Now, traders say both Brent and WTI have more than doubled from decade lows, which were last seen in April. Meanwhile, gold wrapped up the year with its best performance in a decade. Spot gold was up more than 24% for the year. Copper also recorded major gains, rising towards 8-year highs as optimism about strong demand in top consumer China was reinforced by falling inventories. Well, let's shift focus now. In just 36 years, Equity Bank has grown from an insolvent building society in rural Kenya to a top 10 lender on the continent today. It is the second largest bank in Kenya by capitalization and in terms of deposit. It is also the fastest growing bank in the region and now boasts the widest reach with operations in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Sudan, and the DRC. While CGTN's Penina Karibe spoke to the man behind all the transformation, James Mwangi, and why he is not about to slow down. Tonight on BizTalk.
In 2007, we won the Global Vision Award. The citation on the award were initiators of a concept of the future that will shape the global economy. We didn't fully appreciate how much foresight people had seen on the potential of Equity Bank. So what we have really done is to institutionalize that belief that we are there to make a difference. We are there to be a catalyst for people to change their lives. We don't claim to change people's lives, but we claim that we are able to give people tools that enable them to change their lives and livelihoods. And that resonates with people, because when they change, they feel proud and they can claim they have transformed themselves. They owe us nothing. We just gave them tools.
Equity Bank now has 173 branches in Kenya and another 110 spread across Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The bank has also established a representative office in Ethiopia. Expansion has for a long time been part of the group's strategy.
We're looking at for 15 countries, but we're broken down that countries are just imaginary boundaries. We're looking at 100 million customers in 5 years. Whichever countries they come from, we intend to have 100 million customers. We're very lucky that digitization has made this practically. We don't have to have brick and mortar infrastructure, which would have been the most limiting factor. Essentially, if you look, we have used a clip expansion. So given a chance, Ethiopia would be a very ideal country. And of course, as was reflected when we had bid for a Trans-Mala transaction, we were extending on the boundaries of Tanzania to Mozambique and Zambia. Essentially, we are tracking ourselves along the trade routes in the region. So DRC, Lubumbashi, is served by the port of Tanzania. So essentially, we were linking the trade routes.
Mwangi says that the bank's transformative model is ideal for the continent at the moment. He's not only betting on it to grow the bank's balance sheet, but he sees economies being transformed and the realization of the Africa Rising narrative. The Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance, has a special place in his heart.
DRC has given us a flash back into history. DRC has only 6% of its population banked. So it is like Kenya in the 80s. So we have been given another opportunity. This time to replay what we did in Kenya, but not in 30 years, but in under 10 years. And that is why I believe in 5 years, DRC will be bigger than Kenya, because we have learned the lessons. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. We have the capital. We have the capability to leapfrog on technology. And so we want to become more relevant in a country that is the most needed country, maybe in the world, given that a majority of the people are excluded. And we hope to make a contribution to solving the paradox in DRC, being the most endowed country on earth in natural resources, and on the other side, having people enjoying the lowest quality of standard of living. That paradox needs to be solved. And I'm a strong believer that Africa can benefit by supporting DRC, because if DRC transforms, Africa will become transformed.
What would you say is Equity's competitive advantage when it comes to banking in the region?
The biggest competitive advantage of Equity is customer experience. And our customer experience is not based on banking products. It's based on treating people with honor and dignity. That is what truly differentiates Equity. The second one is opening the door for everybody. We are not a niche bank. We don't, we segment the market, but we have a product and a service and a channel for all. Nobody is left behind. So we are relevant to everybody. And there is no other bank in the world that is as inclusive as Equity. Just leave around the region. And lastly, is affordability. We believed in a model that with huge volume and low margin. So we are more affordable. And if you look at competition consistently for the last 10 years, we have been ranked the most affordable bank, or the bank with the lowest charges, as the award leads.
It is difficult to project Equity's growth without a look at its history. It grew on the promise of making banking accessible to a then excluded population.
Back in the 80s, my village of Nyagatogo had nobody who had a bank account. That's how bad it was. That's how much exclusion it was. Banking was a crab. A villager in Nyagatogo would then be asked that if they were to open a bank account, they must be introduced. But they didn't know anybody who could introduce them, because there was nobody in the village with a bank account. So you could see how bad the barriers were. The second thing was the issue of minimum balance. I remember when I got my first job in the late 80s, I was earning only 4,000 Kenya shillings. but the minimum balance that had been set by the banks was 10,000. So I was expected to keep nearly 3 months of my salary as a minimum balance in the bank, not earning anything, but being charged ledger fee on monthly basis. It was that I had to keep on replenishing on monthly basis. And essentially, it was not just minimum balance. Banking opened up at 9 and closed at noon. You're only given 3 hours to access your money. And if you needed more than 10,000 Kenya shilling, you needed to give 2 weeks notice. And if you went to the bank once a week, you couldn't go to the bank again that week because you needed to go to a bank only after 7 days.
A trained accountant, Mwangi joined Equity Bank in 1991 on invitation from other directors to help save the building society that was losing about $60,000 annually and had accumulated losses of about $380,000.
But we had a dream that we could be able to create a banking solution for our people. So it was passion and enthusiasm that gave us way. But given that we were technically insolvent, nobody would trust us with capital among ourselves. We gradually fund ourselves by being paid 25% of our salaries with shares. Shares of which did not have value, but we believed in the future. We're making a sacrifice for a better future. Looking back, for every share that we were issued at that time, we have now been issued 600 shares through spirits and bonuses. But flashing back, what did we do? We democratized banking. We drove banking from a service perspective. We brought honor and dignity to banking. And the people said we had given banking a human face. We had humanized banking. And we realized that it's not what people don't appreciate most what you give them, it's how you treat them. And that then became the beginning of Equity today. After 15 years, we were able to reach a threshold that we could convert ourselves into a commercial bank regulated by the central bank and give confidence more. So from 2000, we kept on growing, attracting. At one point in 2004, that triggered a massive advocacy among the people. We had adequately differentiated ourselves from the other banks, and people then talked about us, and people started coming in big numbers.
The rest, as they say, is history.
Now, of course, you can visit CGTN's YouTube channel for more on that interview with James Mwangi, the CEO of Equity Bank, on BizTalk. Well, let's head over to Egypt now. The country has its own set of staple foods which define the country, from mashed fava beans sandwiches to falafel and koshari. But there is one traditional dish that has a special place in the hearts of almost all Egyptians. It's called molahia. Now on Grassroots tonight, Adel El Marhoui has the story of this green stew that has outstanding nutritious value and a mouth-watering taste.
Every morning, these women come here to separate the leaves from the stem. The scientific name for this plant is Corchorus oletorius, also known as jute mallow. But here in Egypt, it is named after the delicious local dish made out of it, molokhia. The dish has more iron than spinach, more potassium than bananas, and is very rich in calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. More importantly, it's super delicious. After it becomes a paste, the leaves then leave to Sobhi Kabir, a popular restaurant here in Cairo, and I followed it.
For 8 years, I've been working here as a molokhia cook. That's the only dish I do. I learned a special way to do it, and I've become an expert in it. It's all that I can do.
This is one of the busiest capital. Molokhia, however, is prepared in its own section, far from the noise, so the cooks could focus. They mix the paste with fresh meat and pigeon's broth, adding to it dried coriander to turn it into a stew. When the leaves are cooked, it's mixed with fried chopped garlic. Sounds simple? Yet not any chef could adjust the stew to garlic ratio or the broth taste. Mixture could make the dish lose its texture.
Garlic is the most important ingredient in Molokhia. It gives it about 60 to 70% of its flavor. There isn't a table here that doesn't order Molokhia. Let me show you how it's served.
This is the most important step of making Molokhia. When the stew is mixed with the fried garlic, it makes a sound. We call it tasha. In Egyptian tradition, if a kind-hearted cook gasps during the tasha, the Molokhia will taste better than ever. Of course, that doesn't happen in restaurants, but the tasha has gained significance and many chefs like Zizo try to make it as entertaining as possible. It is now the guests' turn to enjoy. Molokhia is usually eaten with bread folded to a cone shape. We say a cat's ear shape. As for the taste,
Molokhia here is out of this world. The only thing missing is our famous bread in the rural. It is spongy, so a dip of bread carries a lot of the stew.
I come here at least once a month to enjoy the Molokhia. The first thing I order is Molokhia. There's no Egyptian who doesn't like it. It's who we are.
the stew may look unattractive, but only to those who haven't tasted it. Once it's in your mouth, it becomes so hard to let go of it. Rimon Nassif hasn't been to Egypt in a year and a half. As soon as he arrived, his wife brought him here for the best molokhia in town.
When I came here, I have to eat molokhia. Give it to me back all the memory from my childhood. Every Egyptian, they love molokhia. It's traditional food. It's like that's how we grow up with Egypt here. So you can say the molokhia, it's like the hamburger in America.
Because it has no animal protein, molokhia is quite affordable. With all its nutritious values, it's a super and delicious food available to everyone. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, before we leave you today, let's check in on Africa's currencies in 2020. South Africa's rand did weaken on the final trading day of 2020, but the currency is on course to end 2020 close to where it began the year, having rallied in the last 3 months. That's mostly because of external events such as Joe Biden's victory in the US and, of course, the development of COVID-19 vaccines. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Naira hasn't fared so well this year. We saw the central bank weakening the local currency to a record low during trading at the investors and exporters market on Thursday. It closed the year at around 410 Naira per dollar. On the spot market, the Naira traded at 400 to the greenback and 470 per dollar on the black market. Now, analysts see the currency depreciating to as much as 415 Naira to the dollar in 2021. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.